Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a historical figure who is, well, almost impossible to put in a neat little box. We're talking about Oliver Cromwell. To some people, he was this visionary who laid the groundwork for early democracy. To others, a ruthless dictator, plain and simple. We're going to unpack his meteoric rise to power in the 17th century and look closely at how a massive, bloody international crisis in 1655 really forced the world to see what kind of leader he truly was. Let's get right into it. To really understand Cromwell, we have to start with an event that absolutely shocked the globe. As historians often point out, the execution of Charles I was the single most remarkable event in the course of English history, and the person who brought it to pass, Oliver Cromwell, was the single most remarkable man. Think about how wild this was back then. The mere thought of a commoner putting an English monarch on trial? Unimaginable. No way. Yet after years of grueling civil war, Cromwell essentially strong-armed Parliament into signing the king's death warrant, which literally changed the course of English politics forever. You have to realize, this wasn't just a political squabble, it was a total top-to-bottom clash of cultures. On one side, you had Cromwell's forces, who were mockingly called the Roundheads. These guys were mostly commoners, famous for their close-cropped haircuts, and just incredibly strict Puritan discipline. We're talking no alcohol, and singing hymns every single day. And opposite them, the Cavaliers, King Charles's loyalists. These were your wealthy landowners, mounted troops strutting around, proudly flaunting a name inspired by Spanish caballeros. It was a massive war of class, of religion, and really over the very future of how people should be governed. So, what did all that extreme, joyless Puritan discipline actually get Cromwell's side? 30. That is the staggering number of consecutive battles won by Cromwell's new model army. Not a single defeat over the course of a 6-year civil war. I mean, the royalists might have laughed at Cromwell's men, calling them noodles for constantly bobbing their heads in prayer, but that laser focus, it forged an absolutely unstoppable military machine. And his rise to absolute power was breathtakingly fast. Just look at how this plays out. 1645 brings this definitive victory at Naseby, where they capture the royal jewels and actually find damning private letters from the king. By 1649, Charles I is executed and the monarchy is completely abolished. Then in 1653, after turning down a literal crown because it violated his democratic and Puritan principles, Cromwell is elected Lord Protector. He even wore plain black to the ceremony just to avoid looking like a king. But fast forward just 16 months into his rule, and his leadership gets tested by an enormous international crisis. To understand this crisis, we actually have to pan the camera away from London, deep into the Cottian Alps. Over there, a pre-Protestant minority known as the Waldensians was dealing with their own quiet, isolated disaster. A devastating plague in the 1630s had just completely wiped out their spiritual leadership. It's one of those classic historical butterfly effects, you know? This one tragic, local event set the stage for a massive geopolitical catastrophe decades later. The death toll among their leaders was just catastrophic. 14 out of their 16 installed Waldensian pastors died. Desperate to keep their community spiritually alive, they practically begged Geneva for help. So Geneva sends over 14 new French-speaking Swiss Reformed pastors to fill the void. But here's where the trouble starts. Over the next 20 years, these new highly articulate pastors increasingly clashed with their Catholic sovereign, the Duke of Savoy. And slowly, the Duke began to view this community not just as ordinary subjects, but as a dangerous political and religious threat. This mounting tension culminated in a chillingly calculated plan engineered by the Duke's military commander, the Marquis de Pionnaise. First, he forces the Waldensians to quarter 4,000 Savoyard troops right inside their own homes. Then, he lulls the community into a false sense of security, promising peaceful negotiations. Finally, the trap is sprung. At 4 a.m. on Easter morning, 1655, the troops were given the order to slaughter the very families that were hosting them. The official report that eventually made its way to Cromwell was uncompromising in its grim reality. It read, in part, "No distinction was given to age or gender. Some hanged from their feet, others torn to pieces. Infants dashed against the rocks. These atrocities sparked a 3-week reign of terror all through those valleys." The historical record is just harrowing. It documents how survivors fled to Geneva and rapidly carried the news across Europe, spreading it until it finally reached the halls of power in London. Now, when news of this horror reached London, it landed right on the desk of Cromwell's personal secretary. And you might recognize his name. It was the legendary poet and writer John Milton. Milton had actually studied the Waldensians for years, so reading these horrific eyewitness accounts, he went straight to work. He drafted a stinging, vitriolic indictment of the House of Savoy. Essentially, he acted as Cromwell's communications director, coordinating a massive, unified Protestant response. But Milton's outrage wasn't just diplomatic red tape, it was deeply, deeply emotional. He penned a fiery sonnet, famously crying out, "Avenge, O Lord, thy slaughtered saints, whose bones lie scattered on the Alpine mountains cold." In the 17th century, a widely circulated poem like this was basically the equivalent of a massive viral campaign. It unified the outrage of the European public and transformed a distant massacre into a deeply personal moral crusade for the entire nation. Cromwell's response to all this was an unprecedented masterclass in multinational pressure. He and Milton fired off these strongly worded decrees to leaders all across Europe. We're talking Sweden, Denmark, Holland, Switzerland, and Transylvania. He even dispatched a special envoy, Sir Samuel Morland, straight to Turin to condemn the Duke to his face. He went as far as threatening to block treaties with France just to force their hand. And back home, Cromwell declared June 14, 1655, a day of fast and organized a massive financial relief collection across every Protestant parish in Britain to help the starving Waldensian survivors. It was early modern international aid at its absolute finest. Now, you might be wondering, why did Cromwell, a guy who was already super busy trying to hold a fragile new Commonwealth together, go to such extreme lengths for a tiny group in the Alps? Well, to Cromwell and Milton, the Waldensians weren't just some random minority. Based on the history they had at the time, they genuinely believed this group traced their roots all the way back to the 4th century. They saw them as the original ancient keepers of the true Christian faith. So for them, defending this group wasn't just a border dispute, it was defending the very essence of Christianity itself. And this right here is where we crash headfirst into the profound contradictions of Cromwell's legacy. You really have to hold two drastically different realities in your head at once. On one hand, yes, he was responsible for brutal atrocities, ruthlessly massacring Irish Catholics and totally strong-arming Parliament. But simultaneously, he was this pioneering protector. He coordinated unprecedented international humanitarian relief, promoted early democratic principles that favored the common person over rich aristocrats, and actually championed religious tolerance for dissenting Protestant sects. It's a deeply, deeply paradoxical legacy. And of course, ordinary citizens definitely felt the sting of his puritanical strictness every single day. There is actually a popular 17th century satirical ballad that lamented, "Oh, Christmas is kicked out of town. You see, the world is turned upside down." Yeah, you heard that right. To force-feed godliness, Cromwell literally banned Christmas. Imagine losing your holidays, your traditional roast beef, your festive sports. To the everyday person, the world truly had been turned upside down by a completely joyless religious dictator. But to view this era accurately, we have to pull back and look at the whole bloody picture. Impartially speaking, during the Counter-Reformation, horrific violence was a tool universally used. Neither Catholic nor Protestant forces had a monopoly on peace. Just as the Savoyard troops massacred the Waldensians, Cromwell's forces carried out devastating slaughters against Catholic communities in Ireland. It was simply an era where religious zealotry blinded leaders across the entire political and theological spectrum. Which leaves us with a really difficult question to chew on. How do we judge a leader who is capable of both devastating brutality and unprecedented humanitarian rescue? Cromwell undoubtedly abused his power, yet he arguably did more to lay the groundwork for modern democratic principles and international human rights relief than any British monarch before him. It's a messy, paradoxical history that completely resists easy categorization. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll leave you to think about this. Does history require monsters to build modern morality?